Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming along. I'm here with Hugo Rittson-Thomas, the photographer, and Catherine Fitzgerald. Actually, this is a big treat for Hugo and I because we've worked together for 12 years now. Can you believe it? 12 years. But we hardly ever see each other because Hugo needs light and I need long talks, and they're not really very compatible. So we meet maybe about once a year to talk about books or doing a new book, or on one memorable occasion, Hugo taught my dog Rufus how to steal biscuits off a table by sort of putting it.
Lies. He was a natural criminal.
Was a natural. And I'm worried he's going to lead my new puppy astray as well, because I sent Hugo a picture of the puppy, Rolo, and Hugo texted me back and said, definitely a biscuit criminal in the making. So, now, we're also delighted that Catherine has been able to join us today, because Catherine and her husband, the actor Dominic West, who's here today, I'm very pleased to say, have created a magical garden at their home in Wiltshire. And it's included in this revised edition of our book, The Secret Gardeners. And here's Catherine and Dominic in their garden. And the fact that Catherine was a landscape designer and a gardener was just a joy for me, because quite often, even good gardeners don't always know the names of the plants, or they say, "Oh, hang on a minute, and you have to go and look it up." But Catherine was able to identify and talk about every single plant in her garden, and also tell me about the history of the house, which is fascinating, the history of their village. We went on a walk around the ancient sunken roads that Catherine explained to me are known as holloways, which is where the name Holloway comes from. And I have a lovely memory of that day, so thank you. But the most memorable moment for me occurred in the kitchen. I said to Catherine that in my experience, there's usually a gender division of labour when you have gardening couples. You know, one does the veg, the other one does the ornamental stuff. One does the lawns and the trees, the other one does the ornamental stuff and the veg, and so on and so forth. And I said to Catherine, how does it work with you and Dominic? And you told me that Dominic built the swimming pond. And I was like, wow. And Dominic turned round from the kitchen sink where he was doing the washing up, tick, yeah, and said, yes, that's right. So Catherine, tell us about the swimming pond and you as a couple in the garden, because I know you, well, I now understand Dominic makes a lot of things for the garden, but you do different areas, don't you?
Yes, we definitely have different zones and like to do different things in the garden. But the swimming pond was very much his thing, and he researched it. He found David Pagan Butler online, and who has a YouTube video, how to make a swimming pond in 4.5 minutes. And he studied this for many months, making contact with this brilliant pond maker. No filters, no machinery. It's completely just a natural pond filtered by plants and gravel. It's plants growing in sand and gravel. So actually, it's the most wonderful focal point of the garden that everybody is drawn to, and is a resource for nature. It's full of dragonflies, and swallows come and shrink and swoop next to you as you're swimming. And it's you know, our ponds are vital for biodiversity. He then went on to dig 3 further ponds for more dragonflies and newts and water boatmen. And when you go and sit by them, there's this wonderful hum in summer, hum of life. And sometimes I think we don't realise what we've lost with, you know, when you're really immersed. And I think the whole inspiration for the garden was to be immersed, and my job is to create meadows where you had the click of the crickets and see the little moths going from flower to meadow grass, and gardens should be immersive, and that's what I tried to do in this abandoned brewery in a very ancient Saxon village, which had many layers of history, including a 18th, 19th industrial past, because of this river, the By Brook, which winds through. There were many mills. At the bottom of our field is a rag mill, and you could see the old leat and the water mill, the water wheel, and old beating tanks where the rags would go into, and then they would be all boiled up and sent off on a little shunt to a huge paper mill. So this forgotten valley was enthralling to arrive into. It's not very far from very busy conurbations, but suddenly you came down into a magical world of ancient weavers' houses, medieval barns, and a 15th century church, and all these mills, and we kind of fell in love with it, and the water. So Dominic has been able to kind of go into this wild, watery world by a river, digging more ponds, and he just disappears there, and I can do all my gardening at the top, and we don't always agree on things, including he's knocked down a few walls with a mini digger. And so, I think everyone can probably relate to that thing. It's nice to do all different things. But you also make progress by the kind of different ideas. You work through it, have terrible rows, but you come to ultimately to a conclusion where you both agree it's better than it was before.
You fine tune the concept by discussing it, basically.
Yeah, rowing, and then usually he does something violent and knocks down a wall, and then I realise it was all for the best, and the energy flows much better afterwards. So I think, everyone has their ways.
I mean, obviously the history of the place and the fact that the building was an old brewery kind of drew you to it. And because I always think that memory and nostalgia have a huge part to play in gardens. Some of the gardens in the book, in fact, are very conscious recreations of childhood gardens. And this didn't surprise me because I think that for us Brits in particular, nostalgia plays a huge part. We grow veg or roses or whatever because our grandparents or parents had a veg patch or loved doing roses. And Sting's wife, Trudy Styler, told me that she wanted roses and veg because her father grew veg and her mother grew roses. And Kath Kiston told me that her very first shop counter was the long sort of spreading branch of a laurel tree in their garden in the country when she was a child. But Catherine, you grew up in a beautiful garden.
Yeah.
At the gardens of Glyn Castle, and I know that inspired you to become a garden designer.
Yes, I was so lucky to grow up in a garden which had many wild, mysterious corners on the banks of the Shannon, and I had 2 gardening grandmothers, but I do think it was the wildness that drew me, and going to Kerry holidays to Robinsonian wild gardens where tree ferns had self-seeded and Himalayan rhododendrons were seeding amongst moss and lichen, and this incredible diversity because of this microclimate that we have in the west of Ireland of the Gulf Stream. So it was really thrilling, huge towering tree ferns, and at Glyn there was a mysterious sort of grove where a tumbling stream, you felt that there were wood nymphs, and you felt that you could connect with your inner self, and afterwards it haunted me, and I used to dream about it. And ever since, I suppose, places, I feel that people are very healed by nature and places, and that's what us designers do. We are there to set a scene, not impose a story, but set a scene where people can imagine possibilities, can connect not only with their inner selves, but with the wider world of nature. And that's our job as designers, is to create that context which doesn't confine, but which nourishes and heals us. And so without, what we do is a language where we try to translate how to achieve that with our tools, with the planting, with the way we use the stone or the way we use paths. So, but for me, that connection with the subconscious is the whole point.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think it's something that we all subconsciously strive for, isn't it? And I think, but because gardens are so personal, it must be quite difficult to persuade people to have them photographed. And I know I have to thank Hugo. I don't have anything to do with choosing the gardens for the book. Hugo goes out and he mesmerizes people with his irresistible charm. And they say yes, although you did have one tetchy reaction when you turned up at dawn to photograph us.
Well, thank you for that compliment, Victoria. I mean, I think my job is, yes, to draw people into the book, but in a way, as you can see in the book, all the gardens are so beautiful, they're so gorgeous, and the owners are also passionate about them. I think it's actually quite an easy job for me. The harder job is to piss the owners off a bit, but not so much that they refuse to speak to Victoria, who'll be coming after me. And one of the vital elements of that is actually a very thorough recce. And you had to be very nerdy. Examine the driveway, examine the size of the gravel, how much noise it's going to make, because of course I have to be there at 4 a.m, and none of the owners are going to want to see Victoria after I woken them up.
So you want the lovely light at dawn.
Yeah, there's lovely light, and so I'm there super early. So the gravel has to be researched, how much noise it's going to make, how far do I have to park from the car, not wake the owners up, and then how far to park from the car. And the vital element, of course, is the dogs. And I was parked so far from this house, I won't name names, but they're very big dogs. I mean, they have better hearing than Siri. How the hell they picked me up there? But it didn't get us off to a very good start.
So you got out with your camera, and then the next thing you were being pursued by bulls.
Oh.
So, but not all your clients object to you turning up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because this is the wildflower meadows at Sandringham, which Hugo photographed for a book he did called Wildflowers for the Queen. Absolutely gorgeous book of wildflower meadows, the coronation meadows, and also individual portraits, because Hugo is a portrait photographer as well, of the flowers, and done in a very creative sort of way. And so anyway, you tell the story about Sandringham and Highgrove.
Well, I mean, we've been very lucky on our journey, Victoria and I, and we have covered a lot of the royal gardens. I mean, Highgrove, well, Clarence House isn't so well known, but I mean, certainly Highgrove and Sandringham are open to the public, so they're quite well known. But I had the opportunity at one of the presentations, to thank the king, when I realized that, I was one of the few people who'd been privileged enough to enjoy these gardens on my own, because again, I'm there at 4 a.m. So he said, I really feel privileged. There at 4 a.m. 4 a.m? 4 a.m, for goodness sake. Should have come and got me. I'm always up then having a pee.
And we'd say, as you say, we did Clarence House for Great Gardens of London, and you also photographed the Queen for your series of portraits entitled "The Queen's People." That must have been amazing.
It was actually. I mean, it's obviously such a highlight for any photographer, and that was worst night's sleep ever before that shoot, which was at Windsor Castle, and one of the problems with that being that it doesn't open till 8:30 to the public, and I've got a van full of equipment, so my nightmare was the van gets a puncture, gets stolen, because you're not going to get a second chance. And it all goes terribly well. We set it up, takes 3 hours. You can't really see in that shot, but it's a blackout shot, so vast blackout surround of curtains, so you don't get the cameras or the lights which are coming over the top in the shot. And this was in the white drawing room, because Annie Leibovitz had used the green drawing room the year before. And no, it was going really well, actually. I was very pleased. Got it out in time, get changed back into our suits. Crew are lined up, ready to meet the Queen. You hear the click of the door. I'm looking at this door, thinking that is not moving, that door. So I look behind me, and the Queen is sneaking behind us, some secret doorway in the bookcase. But I think we got her back immediately, because no one had really briefed her that the white drawing room was temporarily going to be turned black. She recovered very quickly, though.
And you had a bit of an accident with your camera. Your camera was so overawed it stopped working.
Yeah, the camera had a moment, and I mean, of course, the Queen, you have the finest instrument, has been serviced like 20 times to make sure nothing went wrong, and she was the 50th portrait. We had no problems, mechanical, emotional, or any other type whatsoever. Halfway through the shoot, I couldn't believe it. I so nearly said, I can't effing believe it's happened now. But I luckily didn't. And I said to Mary, of course, I've got 2 spare cameras. But we could use this one, so that's fine. So I give it to the digital assistant to fix. And it was at that point, not only did my brain freeze after the camera, but I realized it was my sort of sword and shield. It was giving me protection from the enormous presence of the late Queen. And I really felt her charisma full on at that point. Luckily, I prepared my list of topics, which started with the movie she did for the London Olympics, which involved Daniel Craig,
Oh, yes.
James
And-
Bond, and everything at Buckingham Palace. So I checked actually this was a safe subject, as is an easy one for me to make connection. Ian Fleming being a relation, so that's an easy one. Yes, that's a good subject. It's a very good subject, as long as you mention how well the corgis performed. But there was a silver lining, because even someone as photographed as the Queen, was different person to work with after I got the camera back.
Right.
And that's when I got the best shot. So it's nice. There was a sort.
Maybe she kind of relaxed a bit as well.
Yes. Well, I think my joke about the 5-legged horse was a winner.
And of course, I mean, talking about getting people to relax and be photographed, I mean, getting Ozzy Osbourne to show us his garden, that was a real coup, wasn't it?
Well, he was such a lovely man, actually, for all his idiosyncrasies, is what you say. He was really charming and lovely, and just all he wanted to do was help you. Can I do anything to help? So God rest his soul. He's had a very full life, and this is where he died. So I was very nervous when I arrived, because I had no idea what the garden was going to be like, and I was imagining perhaps something a bit rough around the edges at the very least. And in fact, it was a full-on rock and roll garden. So I was really, really pleased. So yeah, there he is, dear fellow, and he has this Hollywood sweeping staircase, and the other elements, of course, you must have in your garden as a rock and roller is a red foam box in immaculate state, still working.
I don't have a picture of the red phone box,
No.
but I've got a picture of the cow.
And these sculptures
Sorry.
are wonderful. They're all these little terrier dogs, which are half buried in the soil because they're digging away. You just see the backside sticking out.
Yeah, and
That's a favourite. And then even the cow is a fake cow, actually. So
and the cow moves around the garden. They get fed up with it in one place, they move it to another place. And they have a fountain, which is a copy of the one in Central Park. I mean, it's all personal. They're all personal things, these things. They're not sort of like buying the garden by the yard. They're putting things into it that mean things to them. So when we set out to do this book, we wanted to do artists' gardens, because Hugo and I are both interested in how somebody who was trained in art and design. Hugo has a fine arts background, and I don't, but newspaper design is something that I've always been fascinated in. I've been a newspaper journalist for most of my life. So we were interested in the way somebody who was trained in art and design would look at their outdoor space. In the end, the book was broadened out to include other creative people, such as musicians and composers and actors and directors and so on. But one of the best examples of an artist doing their garden in the book is Alan Jones, who's here on the left with his wife, Deirdre, because he designed his garden around his self-portrait. And they live in Oxfordshire, and the first thing you want to do if you live in Oxfordshire or the Cotswolds is to build something that will block out the wind coming from the west. So he knew he wanted a shelter belt. So he started doodling on the land registry plan of the garden and thought, yeah, I need a curve sort of up here to stop that wind. And by the time he'd finished drawing, it was like a sort of silhouette of his head, because he's bald, and the shelter belt followed the curve of his skull, which I thought was incredibly clever. And he's such a nice guy, isn't he? He's
funny enough, he actually he
hang on, there's more of his garden.
was my neighbour for about 15 years, and I'm afraid I have a sort of quite old-fashioned view on neighbours, like that, just ignore them till there's an emergency. So I wasn't very friendly or very helpful or anything. There's no need to be, really. I was in the country. I think London's a different matter. So I was still cursing. Oh, he's always, why is he parking? And there was a knock on the door, and this glass of champagne appeared, and Alan behind it. And I've remained friends ever since. So I learned how to make friends with the neighbours from Alan and Deirdre, who I regard as sort of honorary family members. They're so intelligent, lovely, creative. And I mean, nobody else in that book has come up with the idea of shaping their garden around the shape of their skull. I think it as a
It's
genius.
I love it. I mean, if you're a sculptor, obviously you don't have to buy sculpture for the garden. You just put your own stuff in the middle of it. So this is his gate on the left and another sculpture in this garden. But the hedge behind the red sculpture is he calls the tsunami hedge. And apparently he bought a lot of yew hedging, you know, which you can get for sort of like 20 quid for sort of 10 saplings or something. And he thinks that some of them might have been either fastigiate yews that were packed in with the other yews by mistake, or yews tend to be a bit kind of do their own thing, and some will branch more than others, some will slightly weep, some will go straight up. So he thought he'd follow the pattern of the tree's growth and have these sort of bits shooting up where there were strong leaders and so on, and then formed this hedge which looks like a sort of storm-tossed sea, which I thought was fantastic. But you, so we've talked about, you know, getting the subconscious of the garden, but there are also practical things, aren't there? Like weather and prevailing winds and, you know, dry bits and wet bits and so on.
Yes, it's the right plant for that is going to thrive in the earth will make you a much happier garden, and you won't be struggling and killing yourself to keep things alive. And actually, the soil at the brewery where we lived is very brashy. It's stony and shallow, and so round the terrace there is gravel planting with fennel, which seeds everywhere, and cardoons, which are like artichokes, which have huge thistly heads, and it is a lavender and everything that plants which are adapted to that, you know, that those conditions.
Yeah.
And the same with the water plants around the pool. They're adapted to there. It's an easier way to garden, but of course everyone wants to grow things they love, which aren't necessarily
The things that will grow in
because and if you love roses, I love Portland roses and Rosa mutabilis and these special, meaningful plants which bring you to another time or connect you with a person, and you have to enrich the soil and do all of that. And then I think the other nice thing, if we think of sort of, we want to create a feeling of abandon and wildness, but you also want to feel the hand of man, the sort of, so that's the willow, the hazel structures for the roses. And you see that somehow your heart sort of, you feel, oh, that's, you know, care and husbandry. So
yes,
I think
for ours, your husband who builds that willow.
it's actually, I have a lovely helper, Dominic there. So it's that Dominic. I don't know if Dominic's going to build me my rose hazel arches, but I've learned how to make them from the other Dominic, and it's very satisfying to cut the hazel and sharpen the ends and bend it into the ground, and then you twist the roses around.
Yeah.
So I think that gardening is very much about that year on year, that care. Everyone says, can I have a low maintenance garden? If you get the right plants so that they thrive, that should help you. But I think there should always be this, it's not going to sing and live unless it has that love lavished on it. Well, I may a bit on the owner or the helper, and it brings it to life and brings it into focus. And you notice things. I noticed in the borders at Clifton, someone has had birch and woven and planted climbers through it, and you immediately notice that.
Yes.
So I think the gardening for a place, we try to find the language, the grammar that will work in the design and in the plants.
And I didn't realise, but I knew that you used to work for Arabella Lennox Boyd, who I hugely admire as a garden designer because I love her. She seems to be able to create almost overnight this sense of exuberance and letting plants do what they want. And the picture here is of her double border at Sting's house in Wiltshire. And I didn't realise you worked for her at the time. That she was doing that.
That was one of my first jobs with her. We'd be going there to look after the borders and check and do changes, see what had worked, edit things which hadn't. And so I used to spend quite a lot of time going there and to Italy, to their Italian garden, Il Pelagio. So lots of climbing roses and olive trees and, you know, a very Italian palette, but exuberant. She always had this wonderful exuberant planting, but with the structure of the lavender or the yew or the whatever it was, swathes of, you know, irises and very strong, bold planting, but it did have a romantic. It's incredible, immersed people.
And that one's it's like a mirror image, which is really tricky to achieve because you've got is that Siberian iris in the foreground?
Yes.
And then the Nepeta and so on.
Lupin.
And the lupins. it's very difficult. I always find in my garden, you think, well, that worked, so I'll do that over here. But you can't do it over here because the sun's in a different place, or it's stonier, or whatever. And
She taught me a lot of tricks, really the sure a trick. Well, I mean, repetition is because our eye naturally goes to harmony, balance.
Yeah.
And then you want to then mix that up and do something different in some cases. But there is, in nature, we went to Sicily at Easter a few years ago, and the hillside, it was early spring, and all the acid green euphorbias were repeated all over the hillside. And then the smoky early equivalent of blackthorn or whatever in the hedges, and that was dotted, and it was like a tapestry where the repeat is so satisfying. And I think a lot of designers now are really inspired by natural meadows and the wild, and we seek to recreate that in a garden. And I think from Arabella I learned that thing of remember that balance, and but then mix it up as well. Suddenly you have a huge cardoon towering, and to break it. But she was very good on that, and very good on those key plants that will work. There's so many specials, as we call them, which are treats and jewels which you put in, which are special, but they might not be so reliable, and a lot of clients might not notice they die out, or the gardener isn't. So then if you've got your kind of slightly more your thugs in there, they will be your battalion to pull it through, and then you can do your interweaving. So she taught me a lot, so I'm always grateful to her.
Yeah, I love the idea. I remember an American garden writer writing about vignettes in the garden, where if you want to plant a border, I mean, it's very difficult to work out how many plants you need. But she said, establish one sort of vignette. You want your texture, you want your big leaves, you want your fluffy things, you want your flowering things, and then repeat it. And you can either repeat it absolutely verbatim, or you can repeat it with similar plants. So if you think, oh, I don't want to do the same thing again, that's boring, use similar plants, but you still get, as Catherine so rightly says, that sense of harmony and peace and relaxation in the garden. And because this is Sting's garden, obviously they have a labyrinth. These were very common in Elizabethan times, and also often a sign of Catholic households after Elizabeth, because they were great for meditation. If you were a monk or a priest, maybe hiding out in a country house somewhere, you could meditate walking around this labyrinth. And Sting and Trudy are very proud of theirs. And Hugo did this wonderful picture. I think it's one of my favourite pictures in the book, of them sort of leaping across it. Beautiful garden.
Well, the labyrinth actually it's quite significant for them, because, as you say, they made it, but he actually he based it on a early 14th century sort of tunes that he'd remade in the original form with the sort of ancient musical instruments. And actually that was my breakthrough for getting the shots. I had done my research on that one, spotted that labyrinth was the album cover.
Yeah.
And he said, well, do you want a shot on it?
Wow.
I love that labyrinth.
This is another picture I love. I mean, when we first started the book, Prue Leith hadn't been named as the successor to Mary Berry. I think she was named as going on Great British Bake Off, I think just as the book came out, which of course was too late for us. So since the first edition, she's also moved house, and as well as becoming a household name. And her new garden and her new home very much reflect her personality. I mean, Prue is somebody who is absolutely as you see her. She's very sensible, but at the same time quite whimsical. She loves colour. She's very warm, friendly person, isn't she? And I just love that portrait of her with the scarf. It's fabulous. And as you can imagine, her garden is very colourful. So that's the turquoise bench. Then we've got courtyard garden. So top left is her house, which is quite stark architecturally, but it's sort of a bit misleading, because when you see it, it looks like a sort of monolith, but as you go around, there's sort of bits inside it, and the courtyard garden's actually sort of hidden inside the house. And then this wonderful border with alliums in the spring, and a red bench. And her house is brand new, and that's a challenge for a designer, isn't it? Because new builds, you usually don't have any old walls or features, and the earth is being trodden, sort of absolutely flattened by earth-moving equipment, and there's just a whole load of rubble there instead of topsoil and so on. And
Yes, I think you have to have much more of a concept and an idea for that, because there's not a lot of suggestions for the designer to play with.
yes,
And then you have to really research what the client wants in that case, and how you think you can relate. That new building often feels like a flying saucer that's landed, because you haven't got that pattern of age from levels or whatever. So you have to dig deeper into how you can relate to the wider landscape and how to make the spaces from scratch.
and on a flat plane as well. I mean, my garden's on the side of a very steep hill, which may sound like a disadvantage, but I was thrilled, because the thing that frightens me most is like a big flat area and you don't really know where to start.
So you have to be quite brave with tree planting and some structural shrubs or some hedges, even if you don't like hedges. Dominic doesn't like hedges, or see the point of hedges, but I'm not saying blocking hedges, but this sort of, it can be rounded and soft, like you were saying, like Alan Jones. You can let them take their shape, but it means that you have some kind of enclosure. When you're sitting, you like to have something at your back sometimes. You like to see out, but you don't necessarily want to be completely, like in a desert. And trees, you can plant a few extra trees, you can remove them. There's not, that bucolic pastoral, we crave that feeling of openness but enclosure, and it makes us feel, we want that safe. I think that nowadays I notice with gardens and clients and things, that people are, I think with more and more screens, more and more housing estates and development, that nature and that people are much more wanting that sense of abandon. They're happy to leave paths with self-seeded plants. They're happier to have a bit of wildness, and as it's a solace, and it's a kind of alternate world to, I think, what we're finding is, less and less wildness, and I think more people want that. Everyone wants us to help them with making meadows, and how it's quite difficult in some cases, more difficult than planting a herbaceous border in some. And so, but that is the way, and I think that kind of the trees, all the different elements and rich textures give that feeling around a new build.
Yes, and I mean, Jeremy Clarkson's house, this is Jeremy's wildflower meadows, which Hugo will tell you are spectacular. His house is a new build as well, and we'll come on to that. But you had a bit of a disaster at Jeremy's as well, didn't you?
Well, yeah, as you said, it's a young garden, and Lisa's really embraced it. I mean, it's very impressive, the speed of progress they've made, to be honest.
And they have the cutest lambs in the world.
But having done wildflowers for the Queen, for the King, I love the wildflower meadows. They have a real place in my heart, and I drive past these meadows very regularly, and I've appreciated them for many years. And so I'm trying to include as many as possible, in the book, publishers willing. And not only are they hard to plant if they're in a garden, they're near damn impossible to photograph well as so. Target the weather very carefully to get the right light. And of course it's raw sometimes, and it was on this occasion. So I'm there at 4 a.m. It's a waste of time. I need a low shot, trying to get the shot is not here, trying to get a shot across the valley of the meadows with close foreground to give it body. And it's a waste of time. So I get some twigs and mark the exact spot where I can come back and do it when the conditions are right. Disappear to Madrid for some shoot for 2 days, come back, and it's actually a bank holiday, or it's Friday the bank holiday. And the conditions inevitably were perfect for the Saturday. So I thought, oh, well, it's got to be done. These meadows are not going to last forever. Got to grab the moment. And, I recce'd it fully. I knew the track is basically a tractor track. I was just thinking about the shot as I got roughly 50 yards from the exact point of my little twigs, when the vehicle came to a grinding halt. I was so dumbfounded, because I'd driven the same track 2 days previously. Couldn't understand it. And no matter revving, would get the car out. And it's not a car, it's, a photographer's old 4x4 with winter tires. So it can get through the Alps in any amount of snow. It's never been stuck ever. But Jeremy's, it was stuck right up to the axle.
Wow.
So I think, well, that's screwed it. I'll go and get the shots and come back and review the situation. And it was still only about 6:30. So I wait for an hour, it being a bank holiday. Luckily, I know the neighbour. So I thought, I send him a WhatsApp. At least I'll establish if he's awake and I won't make a nuisance of myself. And I might get some help. So, yeah, he calls back immediately. And I'd said, oh, can I borrow your tractor for an hour to hoik my vehicle out? It's a bit of an emergency. And he said, no, you can't, because now all our land is grass for Dalesford. We have 0 tractors. Sorry. Why don't you ring Caleb? And that's exactly what I didn't want to do, because as soon as you say vehicle stuck, a field crew appears on Jeremy's farm. And I did not want to be humiliated as, that twat that got his car stuck in the one spot that was sticky. So I wait a little bit longer, ring another friend. He's got a 4x4. He comes out with a chain. That snaps. I mean, this was, a tractor-deep, wretched hole. Finally, I find some chap in Banbury. He's got a flatbed truck, and he hoiks the thing out. But it took a lot of effort not to appear on his program as, that twat that got his vehicle.
So you think Caleb might have kind of, gone through it with a sort of like a rotavator or something, so that you would get stuck and they could do a thing on it?
Well, it felt like that. It wasn't like that before. I think it rained really heavily in the 2 days I'd been in Madrid. That was the thing.
Gosh, Hugo, I never knew you had so many challenges with the...
Yeah, it's fun being a photographer.
It's so, and well, Jeremy's house at the new build is at the top of a hill, but they didn't want any Shellsbirds, unlike most people who you talk to who live in Oxfordshire, because they wanted to look out from, this is the terrace at the back of the house, they look out over their meadows, and you only need the slightest bit of wind and you're sitting in a howling gale. So as you can see, there's this rather unconvincing sort of little 2 pairs of aluminium seats and chairs. Nobody ever sits at the back of this terrace. Like, they have huge windows though, so they can sit inside and look out, which I think is a good compromise. And it's the soil around the garden, the soil around the house has been very compacted. But of course they have Caleb, who can deliver piles and piles of well-rotted manure for the gardener. And they have a sunken garden beside the house, which is this bit on the right. The steps go down and they have a huge table there where everybody gets together to discuss things. And that's much more sheltered. And but it's because you can't see the sunken garden and the big table, there's a sense of, there's a very slight sense of keep back. And I think seats almost sort of are like a welcome sign in a garden. Don't you agree, Catherine?
Oh, yeah.
They kind of form focal points and they sort of invite you in, if you like.
And to be in a garden, I think it's very easy. Everyone's really busy and you work hard in your garden and you rush off. But if you put a seat, you are invited to come and you sit there and be in there and you listen to the birds. If it's water, you listen to it. And that is all part of why we love gardens, is being in them. And I think the seats and places for you to stop and are really key and, really make the whole experience.
These are seats, wirework seats in Catherine's garden. I mean, how could you not want to go and sit?
I mean, I escape from life, from all the children, all the noise, and you go through the little orchardy meadow to the seat, and the apple branches have been left to grow really long. No one can see me, no one can get me, and you can just hide there.
So, and how do you feel, Hugo, because you've got to try and encapsulate, although I know you turn up at dawn for light and so on, but you've also got to try and encapsulate the feel of a garden in what seem, by the time you get to the book, very few photographs. I mean, is that nerve-wracking? Is it exciting? Or?
Well, actually, it's both, to be honest. I mean, it's exciting because you actually have this narrow window of time. So you're really, the clock is running. So if it's a sunny day, you might start from 4:30, but by 8 a.m., it's all over. That's why I never see anyone.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw you. I never met you.
They're generally not out there.
And this is more of Catherine's house, sorry.
But it's also nerve-wracking because you've no idea what's there. You've got this short window, probably no idea which way the sun's going around the garden. And the first thing is try and divide the shots between evening and morning. What's going to photograph best in the evening light, and which are the macro shots and which are definitely the mid shots are going to get used, and try and get it done by 8 a.m. and it's too sunny and bright and no good for the publishers. And so I was so excited to go to Nick Mason's because I think the rock aristocracy is slightly taking over from the aristocracy, and literally in this case he bought Queen Camilla's garden. I was very excited to see this, so I'm there at 4 a.m. of course, and I really was speechless because there was a car parked in every single shot, anywhere I could take a shot, and it's not a big garden. There was a classic car, and I've got a choice between waking him up and say, "Oh, mate, can I have the keys?" or just getting on with it. So I thought, let's embrace it and have a slightly different chapter, and I'm sure Victoria can write the hell out of it one way or the other. But literally, he had Ferraris and cars that won Le Mans, and of course, he comes grinning at breakfast time with a cup of coffee, saying, "Oh, do you like the new additions to the garden?" Thank you.
And of course, it was a nightmare for me because I'm no slouch at identifying plants, but I knew that I had to get the Ferraris right. And there are so bloody many of them. And so I did my best. And nobody's complained yet, have they? Now, you might say, well, all the people in this book have gorgeous gardens, but they don't do the gardens themselves, and they've got lots of money. They get somebody else to do it for them. They can afford to have whatever they want. And I can tell you that Catherine, as you probably gathered by now, is a very hands-on gardener. And you may also think that being in a creative job means that you're creative at work. So why would you go home and be creative? But that doesn't always follow, because if you're in a creative job, there are always constraints, usually to do with budgets, personnel, time, whatever. But in your garden, there are no constraints. You can do exactly what you want. And you have this, as Catherine was saying earlier, this sort of freedom to be you. There's no chief executive or director or cameraman or whatever to come along and say, "Oh, I don't like that. I want that over there." You can just put things wherever you like. And I know you relish that, don't you, Catherine, in your own garden? You do gardens for other people, but in your garden, you can be you.
Yeah, I think you can, in your own garden, it's like, I feel it's a experimental, you try combinations of plants which you might not for a client unless you've tried them yourself. And then, I love putting rose hips, like species roses, in the middle of flowers so that you have all the different textures of crab apples. And so you have crab apples and hips, and they in the autumn, and then you have the flowers, and then you have acid foliage before. So you mix things, and then you feel confident with people that works with other people. And then also, I think in our own gardens, and we can feel like self-seeding plants, like annuals, biennials. You can plant a lot of them and let them do their thing, and everything comes up with. Gardening is uncontrolled, as well as you choose what you want, but all sorts of things happen, all sorts of coincidences and combinations you'd never have even dreamt if you'd studied it for years. So it's really nice to see and think, "Oh, that looks so lovely with that," and then I can put that in someone's garden. So it's a real crucible for ideas, my own garden. And it can be much more, I bung things in because I haven't got anywhere else to put it. And sometimes all these happy mixes happen. It's not just precious and more experimental, and you ditch plants that don't do well, and you think, "No, I'm not going to use that again." And you can really want to garden for having lots of moths and butterflies and bees and birds, and try things for that, and sort of do it for yourself, and then that can feed into your work. So your own garden as a designer is definitely very useful for that.
And I think also you become more aware of the seasons in your own garden.
Gosh, yeah, you really do. And I think in COVID and things, when everyone was at home, everybody, do you remember, everyone was going on walks every day, and you see the walks around in all the lanes, which are very steep and narrow. There's such a succession of native bulbs, and the early anemones come, and then you've got the buttercup, the bluebell, there are other bluebells, and the little creeping buttercup. One thing, celandine, and then the leaves, and then the hedgerows start. It's like a fine green net starts to come, where the tiny buds, which we used to be called in Ireland, something like, so because people used to eat them. So not jam and bread, but I don't want to. And the fine net and the green starts to spread, and you've got the hawthorn, the blackthorn earlier, and it's a succession. And I think as gardeners, we want to copy that succession. So there's always something coming, but it just is, it's natural, and it's
I agree, and I hope you don't mind, but I've put a couple of pictures of my garden up in October, because around this time of year, people would always say to me, "Oh, have you put your garden to bed yet?" And I know a lot of people use that phrase, but it always makes me cringe, and I say to them, "No, I haven't. My garden stays up late and has parties." Because, who would not want to look at that? I don't want to cut all that down now. And for aesthetic reasons, yes, and also for practical reasons, because the birds will feed on grass seed heads and all the rest of it. And the Stipa gigantea, the giant oak, that looks good through till March. And then by that time it's looking pretty tatty, but then it's only a month or so before it starts growing new shoots.
I hate cutting the meadow because all the life is rattling away in it, and then you just go through. It's like those stories with Dormouse when the bus. No.
And so, Hugo, how do you feel about your garden? Because I've seen it evolve for over the 12 years that I've known you, and you must feel proud of what you've achieved, because it's looking pretty spectacular now.
I do actually feel very proud, because it was a blank canvas.
Yeah.
There was no garden. So I've been very lucky, trying to create it and make a lot of mistakes and then recreate. And now, I think you were saying, like, having areas to sit in, and there are so many areas now. I don't have enough time to enjoy them all. I want a longer summer. I mean, that's a white garden. It's beautiful. Lunchtime, I love sitting on the left side, which is vegetable gardens. Absolutely tip top right now as well, and so much colour still prevalent. And then I think in the next slide,
The mirror pond.
that's good all year round.
And we were talking about
Very-
MEMS earlier, and you saw a pond like that at David Hicks's garden.
There's an exact.
You wanted,
I went and measured it.
yeah.
I have no shame whatsoever. I mean, under the door, but I love it.
And then
And the final place is that's given a fair wind, where I had breakfast on that bench. And as Catherine said, it is it's one of those places that hum with life. I mean, the difference between a wildflower meadow and a garden is quite enormous. But here, in that spot, it's just humming with life.
Yeah.
Quite lucky not to get in there without getting stung by a bee or something. But it's just a place of such tranquility and peace. The dew is still on the flowers. And I love it.
Cool.
Very lucky.
It's like a sort of tapestry. And when the publishers were looking for a cover picture, this was one of the options, and they put up another option, which they liked, which was a much more formal shape of a garden. And Hugo and I said, well, we like the flowers. And they said, well, we like the other cover because we feel it's more aspirational. And I said, in all my life that I've been writing about gardens or doing my own garden, loads and loads of people have said to me, I want a garden with lots of flowers. Nobody has ever said to me, I want an aspiration-y garden. So they said, oh, right. So they put Hugo's garden in the cover. So,
well, it is meant to be earthly paradises of the creatives, and there it is. I'm very happy in it. Yeah.
And, well, anyway, I would love to ask Hugo to tell me funny stories all day long, but I better step back now and ask you guys, the audience, if you want to ask any questions. So has anybody got any questions for Catherine or Hugo? Yeah.
Just like to know if you're about to do anything for someone that's broken your gardening soul, because it's just wrong.
Well, I have been part of a project where I saw it going wrong, and there was nothing I could do. I really liked the client. She's wonderful, and we'd done lots of good things for her. But she had an architect, and she was just in the process of wrecking this Irish low farmhouse that was part of a novel in the 19th century about farming life that looked over a lock, a magical kind of holy lake, and you could see it from below. And the only planning condition, she couldn't get planning for years, but then she did, and she put a huge sort of enormous, bizarre window that was coming up, towering over the garden and everything. And what can you say? That's true. It was halfway through, but yeah, because places are so special. They have their own atmosphere and their own, and you tread lightly to try to do that. So that was a bit heartbreaking because she kind of had ruined it.
I don't get asked. I mean, people ask me what to plant. I'm not a garden designer, and I tell them immediately I'm not a garden designer. And so I usually have two experiences with people. First of all, they'll say, "Well, if you were me, what would you plant here?" And I tell them, and they say, "Oh no, I don't like that." And then the other thing they do is they say, "Can you come and look at my garden because I've got a problem with it?" And you go around and they say, "Well, it's this plant. It's too big," and you say, "Well, it's as big as it wants to be." But I think there is a type of person who sees gardening as outdoor housework. So everything has to be tidy and restricted in height and width and where they're supposed to grow. And I find it very difficult to offer advice to people like that because I know it's just so not on my radar that I can't think of anything helpful to say except buy a garden vac, maybe. But yeah. Any more questions? I can't see because of the light. So, Dora.
So, hi. I told you not to ask a question.
Especially not that one.
Since all your gardens and designs, your priority is to foster and preserve, or like a wilderness, and it's you said like bucolic, pastoral harmony, and where the plants and flowers can reclaim land. As your job, do you have their like formula and like methods that you have in order to? I don't know what I want to say.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it kind of seems effortless and natural, but
I think you do over time. You do. I don't want to call them your tricks, but you learn what works, and so you have that in your pocket, and that's your kind of you go back to that. But I think each site, really, if you're doing a job, you have to rethink it from the start and rethink it for that place and try to do something new in each place according to what that place is. So I think it's a bit of both. You've got all that knowledge that you've had from experience and you can bring that into play. But when you repeat things, it never works so well again. The time that it looked great, and if you just copy it, it's just in a different place. It's not really what we should be doing.
No, but there are techniques that you can use which over what a lot of people would think of as overplanting when you're first planting the garden to make it look very luxuriant. Because especially today when we move around a lot more than we used to, but our parents, grandparents used to live in the same house for years on end. Now we tend to move around more, and you want a garden to look good almost immediately.
And people are really disappointed if you say, well, this plant in 2 years will grow like that.
Yes.
So let's just leave lots of space. You have really sad people looking at you going, but I have had clients saying, I don't want to see any bare soil.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that is, so you think, well, okay, the winter, things die down in the winter. And I've had the clients say, but where are the roses? But it's winter. And well, the roses are going to flower.
I had, there's somebody who lives not a million miles away from me who refused to have Mexican daisies, which seed themselves around a garden, look beautiful, little daisy flower. Because she said, in the winter they make me feel depressed. And people have, there's sort of no answer to that. You think,
okay. I mean, yeah, I had a client who didn't like the smell of Christmas box sarcococca, which has this delicious lemony honey scent in the winter just when you need it, and often plant it like Daphne by the door. And she just thought it smelled like some air freshener or something. Yeah. So, I mean, people have their odd quirks. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'm not a great gardener. I don't go to my garden. And so I'm getting a really good sense today of how it's not just about how things look, but you just mentioned their smells. And I'm wondering, How much in the initial design do you think about smells? Do you think about textures? Do you think about the sensation, say, of a sitting place? How do you would look?
Completely. I think that is really, really think about scent and smell, because I think we sometimes forget about it in life because we're rushing about. We're so visual how things look, but scent brings you back to childhood, to other places. You're going, what is that smell I know? It's like rue. My grandmother had rue by the door. It's a really odd smell, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And I saw it the other day and smelled it. It was completely transported. So I think it is something that gets forgotten in garden design. If you're at Chelsea, everything's got to look perfect. I mean, no one's thinking about the scent, and that seems to play out. So I think it is really important. I think people also fixated on colour and flowers, but textures. I think that's becoming more popular now. Grasses, the softness, that sort of feathery feeling. So I think textures are really important. And also because grasses can look good all winter when, if you've got a client who doesn't like bare soil, I think it's all got to be covered the whole time. Grasses do that. And they have that lovely texture all winter till you cut them down in March, and then there's a problem moment. But architectural foliage, I love big gunneras and cardoons and big leaves from my Wester Island childhood, where because of the Gulf Stream you can grow these bananas, tree ferns, all that. There's no flower. No, you don't have to have flowers to have a lovely garden. You can have green ferns, wonderful, that way, the shuttlecock ferns, the fiddleneck ferns. There's so much you can do without all the usual things or colour, is with architecture, with green, and the scent. Yeah, good question.
Do you think, with time change is becoming hugely different in the sector?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we are so lucky in England. We have some of the top designers working today. I think we're in a sort of golden age, as we're very lucky historically to have two. But we've got Thomas Stewart Smith and Dan Pearson, who I live near, and they are all experimenting with these dry gardens, which is with layers of sand, put a soil, and then planting into layers of sand. So the tap roots are growing down to the soil like that deep, and they will then be stronger to withstand drought because their tap roots they've been grown toughly. The plants aren't big and floppy, they're quite hard, they're grown in a tough way. They're really resilient to no watering, they don't need any water. And what a relief, if you're going around watering the whole time. If you have a sand garden, you never have to think about that. But it's not that easy, because then suddenly we get these winters of pouring with rain, and then those plants don't really like sitting in freezing, pouring rain. You'd have to have a very well-drained site on a slope. And then I'm talking to Tony Kirkham, the great tree man, trees for the future. If you want to create your traditional, parkland planting with native trees, and there are a lot of people who, think, for exotics shouldn't be introduced to our sort of native flora, blah, blah, blah. But actually, even if you want to stick to you believe in sticking just to native trees, it's not going to work going forward. And many of our native trees are suffering. We've got the ash dieback, or we've lost the elm already. Now we've got horse chestnuts, can't plant them. We don't have a big flora. So to say, it's not a good idea to plant exotic trees from other countries is crazy, because we're not going to have, we need to be thinking and planting accordingly. Trees are like North American trees that can put up with dry summers. And that is really an interesting topic that I think there's a lot of study going on about that, because if you look around everywhere where I live, the ash is just decimated and the hedgerows have no tree. It's very worrying.
It's a really... I'm so sorry. I'm being told we're out of time. Oh,
Yeah.
are we out of time? I'm so sorry. I know you wanted to ask a question. Come and talk to us when we're signing in the bookshop. Anyway,
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you so much.